Hi, this is Bob Mulligan. I'm recording some material that did not get recorded when I started this workshop, Astrology, Karma, and Reincarnation for the NCGR chapter of South Florida. It's a wonderful workshop. I hope you take the time to go through it. Here's the material that was at the very beginning that did not get recorded. I want you to see an outline for the book, The Heart of Astrology, which was released on last Saturday when this workshop took place. Here is the outline for the book, The Heart of Astrology. The first section is called Spiritual Foundations, which is to talk about the things that we have as assumptions as we look for ways of using astrology to advance spiritually. Conferring with the planets shows my unique approach to dealing with the fact that the planets are beings all unto themselves, and that they manifest in our inner state as our mind, our thoughts, parts of our personality, our being, but they also manifest as in the external world. And then the final section, how karma works, is to take on the whole process that goes on in creation and where we find ourselves in it. And how do we use it for our benefit? The 10th chapter, Astrology, Karma, and Reincarnation, is the foundation for what goes on in this workshop. I should say before I go on, if you have questions or thoughts, you're more than welcome to email me or phone me, and I'll do my best to take it up, because actually you're not here with me at the moment, so you can't ask questions on the fly. The process of reincarnation starts when we, as souls, enter the human kingdom. Evolution starts for the soul when we enter creation, but we don't enter as human beings. When we come in to this incarnation as a human being, we have the ability to use our mind to make decisions that can alter our path back to wholeness exponentially. This process is speeded up tremendously by using astrology. And I want to demonstrate some of the ways that that is possible. Now, reincarnation and karma is something that probably 90% of the astrologers in the world today take for granted. That wasn't necessarily the case 50 some years ago when I entered the field. In the early part of the 20th century, Alan Leo, the father of modern Western astrology, said, and I quote, "The science of the stars stands and falls with karma and reincarnation, and I have no hesitation in saying that without these ancient teachings, natal astrology has no permanent value." Wow. That's a very big deal, because you, in the West, not necessarily in India or other places in the East, but in the Western world, it was believed that you were the way that you were because of the time and place that you were born, that your chart determined how you were going to be in this lifetime. But what Alan Leo did, and through his exploration of being in India, his exploration of theosophy and his own inner life, he came to understand that you were born at a particular time and particular place because of how you are, that your karma determined where you would be, how you would be, whether you'd be rich or poor, blind, well cited, whether you'd be popular or unpopular. Every aspect of your life was determined by your karma. Well, okay, but where does that come from? It comes from what we do. What we do creates our karma. Now, I wanted to start the workshop with some definitions because people often misunderstand what karma is about. And so I put out a small table here. Reincarnation, the soul takes a new body, is born again. The soul did not begin with the body. It does not end with physical death of the physical body. The soul takes on many different forms coming up to the human kingdom. And then when the consciousness is complete, when it's developed, having gone through the stone state, the mineral state, the animal kingdom, all of the things that are pre-human, as forms that the soul takes on to keep developing consciousness, it eventually arrives at complete consciousness and takes the human form. And then for a long period of time, the soul takes a number of human forms until it doesn't do it anymore, until reincarnation is done. So if karma determines where and how we are born, what is karma? Karma is the law of cause and effect. It's the moral equivalent of what we find as every action has a reaction. It is the necessary and natural happenings in one's life that are preconditioned by past lives. Now, sometimes people get the concept of karma and dharma mixed up with each other. And so it's very simple if you think of it as your dharma is your essence, your mission, your station. It's what you're about in the life. It is it is the essential property of your personality, of your spirit for a lifetime. Well, often karma also gets confused with the concept of sanskaras. Now I'm going to take a time to distinguish between sanskaras. It means mental impressions. It's a Sanskrit word, but it's an important concept because karma is a completely mechanical operation, meaning that it's like the law of gravity. It just is. It functions this way. You send out something. You plant corn. You harvest corn. You get angry. You sending out anger. The anger eventually comes back to you because the soul is always looking for completion. It's looking for a way of being done, having a sense of wholeness. So, what are sanskaras? Sanskaras are mental impressions. Every action creates an impression on one's mind. Every thought creates some mental impression. And we live in the three worlds. We have a mind, we have feelings, we have actions. Thoughts, our mental body, is the place where everything starts. So the starting of an idea, the starting of an action begins with these very basic impressions. And you may ask yourself, if sanskaras determine what you think, well, is there like an endless regression? How do they ever get formed to begin with? And they are with us from the beginning of the soul entering creation, but they gather momentum as we go along until we reach the human kingdom. Now, you can think of a mental impression, a samskara, that operates in the mind is an idea. Like, oh, I can see a picture of ice cream in my mind. Well, then you get a feeling, oh, I would like ice cream. It becomes a subtle impression. Now it becomes a desire. And that desire prompts you to take an action where you go to the freezer, you take out some ice cream and you eat it. That becomes behavior. And that's where karma is formed. You have ideas that you never put in to operation, and they do not form the kind of karma that gets us into behavioral problems in the material world. We can talk about that in great detail a little later on. But for right now, we might just ask ourselves, okay, if our behavior determines what we're going to have as our next advent, our next incarnation, you might say, well, why do we reincarnate? What brings us in to reincarnation? And it is inevitably, it's shown by Mars in your chart. Why? Because Mars is our desire nature. And without a desire, there is no energy to come into the material world, to take on a physical form. The physical form is very important because it is only in your physical body that you make spiritual progress in a lifetime. Well, where does it start? Reincarnation starts only after we've become complete in our consciousness and we don't experience enlightenment. We don't automatically go to a whole grasping of God and our larger personal identity. So where does it end? It ends when we are stripped away of all desires and our consciousness is united with the absolute, with reality, with our real self. Left under its own steam, the soul would take 8,400,000 human forms before obtaining liberation. But the intervention of a perfect master, God in human form, coming into your life can liberate you from a lot of your karma quickly. The other thing is that we can use astrology to make better choices, to understand ourselves at a deeper level and speed up the process of reincarnation. Now, you may ask yourself, why would I want to speed up this process? Well, it's because the world that we live in is suffering. We have experiences, we like certain things, we don't like certain things, but regardless, it always leads to having a grim feeling about ourselves and about life, and we suffer. But we suffer because we have desires, and how to overcome those desires is a very, very big deal. Now, in an early part of the book, chapter 2 of the book, I talked about ways of liberation shown in the astrology chart. And what I want to recap here is that what keeps us tied to the wheel of karma, coming back again and again, is our ignorance. We wouldn't be here if we hadn't been ignorant. If we had known what was going on, we wouldn't have gotten on the Ferris wheel. But what brings us here is our desires. So we want something, and that want keeps bringing us back. Now, people often ask me, is it an impediment not knowing exactly what happened in past incarnations. Well, your chart shows a roadmap for what has gone on before, and that roadmap helps you understand what is necessary to go through. And there are ways of intervening so that the karma, which is binding, becomes non-binding. It is not an easy process. The answers are simple, but the solutions require great effort. But at least once you understand what the process is really about, you can get on with the journey. Now, there are people who are in astrology that don't believe in reincarnation, but I'm not even going to address that. Amongst the people who understand reincarnation as a reality, tend to split into two camps. One is Dane Ridjar's camp, where he says the astrology chart gives you the medicine. It tells you what the prescription is, but it doesn't tell you what the disease is. And then there on the other end of the spectrum is the evolutionary astrologers, which look and say, if you know how to read it, everything that you need to know about your past incarnations is shown in great detail in your chart. And I'm more or less in that camp. That the thing is that it is not so easy to take a chart apart and to understand the exact details of past incarnations. Now, I had past life memories when I was born. So for me, none of this, long before I became an astrologer, none of this had any significance. After I became an astrologer, I kind of wondered, is any of this shown in people's charts, and can we verify it? So I hooked up with a woman astrologer that's long since gone, but some of you, if you're of my generation, would know her, Marcia Moore. Marcia Moore and Mark Douglas wrote some astrology books. The most important one is called The Astrology, the Divine Science, which is, great big thick book that describes everything under the sun astrologically. It's very well written. And there was an interest that she had in helping people uncover past life memories. And so in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, there was a lot of work that was done in this arena. Marcia Moore had this technique called hypersentience, and I taught workshops with her. We uncovered past lives for people by having them go back and directly see them. I documented lots of case histories this way and looked for correlations with people's charts. And what I can tell you is that from my perspective, everything that I know that was written on, the 12th house shows past incarnations, or, you're born an Aries and then the next incarnation, you're going to be a Taurus. And so many ideas that were tossed out in that way were all wrong, meaning that they did not actually bear fruit when you had the person seeing their past lives and you had their chart. Now, I'm a simple guy. I thought it should be something that would be clear as the nose on your face if you're doing it correctly. And what I found was that, yes, you could make those correlations, but they weren't what people thought. So what I did was try to look and see what the most cogent features of a person's horoscope were and how they latched on. And we can talk about this a little bit later when we talk about the north node of the moon, the south node of the moon. But what I wanted to say now is that the moon rules the past, and it is often such a helpful clue as to what the person is striving for in this lifetime, because they feel it was incomplete in their past lives. And remember, the moon rules the past. The moon rules the part of the brain that stores memory. It rules the Akashic records. It is our aura, and many things having to do with the moon are very telling. Just want to a quick footnote in here. The three major paths to God involve the mind, the emotions, or our physical activity. The mind pattern is connected with Uranus. It's called, that's the attribute of infinite intelligence, and often aspects from the moon to Uranus or Mercury or Jupiter, handful of other things, can point to past strivings along the path of knowledge. Aspects to Venus or Neptune are connected with the path called Bhakti Yoga, which is the path of love. And in the West often shows up in the charts of artists, because art is a path toward a goddess infinite bliss. And then the planets Mars and Saturn, Pluto, are connected with karma yoga. But the point that I'm making here is that you can always start with looking at the moon as being a reliable ingredient for what has happened in the past, that is creating the envelope for how things come together in this incarnation. Now, I found rummaging around in people's past incarnations after a while to be a little tedious, and it would be like the term in business communities is called mouse milking, a lot of effort for very little return. And so there are quicker ways, but sometimes people need to be able to see their past lives to know that it's a reality, to know that they have actually lived before and that they have done things that cause certain things to happen in this incarnation. What I wanted to say, though, is that you get to a place where you look at the reclaiming of past life memories as being a little beside the point. But there are times that I have in my case histories that have been very striking. I had a woman artist come to me in the late 70s who had she was in my age group. In her whole life, she had had pain in her wrists, and she was a musician and a painter, and very practiced at it and good, but the pain in her wrist had been there, her whole life. And when we regressed her, she had been in World War I in the trenches, and a bomb went off and it blew off her hands right at the wrist. And as soon as she recalled that past life memory, as soon as she saw herself in that situation, the pain in her wrist went away. And it never recurred. And it's been a long time. And it was one of those things where the wound was in her aura. And sometimes when we have something in our energy field, medical science can't address it. And psychologists can't necessarily always, get to the root and overcome it. But being able to see it sometimes is a great relief. Anyway, past lives for some people is just, it's entertainment, it's fun. I don't find it to be particularly useful beyond the point of being able to say, okay, then there is something going on. But what we want is to overcome all of our limitations, overcome all of the things that keep bringing us back into this world. And now I want to go on and talk about retrograde planets some. But I think that we've got the introduction to this workshop where it needs to be. And if you have questions, as I say, please get a hold of me. And if you want to take apart some aspect of this work that we haven't touched on, feel free. Anyway, now we'll go back and get involved in the workshop where we started, okay? Thank you.